So for those of you who don't know, my name is Ali Feldhausen. I am the US-based program manager for Social Builder. Social Builder is a tech nonprofit that seeks to develop a more inclusive tech ecosystem for women through free trainings and things like this, like free webinars. This event is the first in our Path Forward for Women in Tech series. It's our second webinar series. And for this series, we're going to be focusing more on what are nonprofits, government agencies, and companies doing to both create greater inclusion in tech and also to kind of meet the moment and pivot as a lot of things go remote. For those of you who haven't been to an event before, we typically have about a 30-40 minute panel followed by a Q&A. So if you hear anything that you want to learn more about, or if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. I'll be kind of monitoring that as we go along, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. Yes, please feel free to be active in the chat. That's kind of your guys' space. And what else? I guess on that note, I'm just really excited to have this panel here. I've had the opportunity to work with everyone a little bit, and I love the work that you're all doing. I think you're all really fantastic, and I'm so excited to have Narissa as our moderator. So I think on that note, I will pass it off to Narissa Hajratali, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Ali. Hi, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for Social Builders event. Like Ali mentioned, my name is Narissa. I'm a software engineer and recent bootcamp graduate from General Assembly. And prior to joining software engineering, I was working in the healthcare space, but decided to do a career switch because I'm really interested in the way tech can be involved in the greater social impact space. And I'm really excited to be, yeah, I see some General Assembly folks in the chat. But yeah, I'm really excited to be moderating tonight. And before I introduce our speakers, just another reminder, like to keep yourself on mute and to be active in the Zoom chat. We'll be able to address those questions at the end. So at this point, I'd just love to hand it over to the panelists so they can introduce themselves. Anyone want to kick us off?
Great, I'm happy to kick things off.
Thanks,
my name is Amy Furman. I'm the Director of Programs at Breakthrough Tech New York. And Breakthrough Tech is a partnership between Cornell Tech, that's located on Roosevelt Island, and also the City University of New York system. So we pretty much work across all the CUNY schools, and our mission is to propel more women into tech careers, largely by encouraging their undergraduate studies, with a really specific focus on the women that are most underrepresented in the tech sector. And that's how we sort of end up partnering with CUNY, as it's, I think it's one of the largest public university systems in the nation, certainly. So I think I recognize a few names on here of students that have participated in our program. So great to see some of you again. And I'll turn it over to maybe Derek to go next.
Yes, thank you so much, Amy. My name is Derek Stroman. I'm the founder of What Now Works, where we are basically, building those talent pipelines and placing talent with those small to mid-sized companies who are looking for people to work in the data science as full stack developers, UX, UI. I started to dabble in the IT and cyber security space, which I think is a very open space where there's a lot of jobs that are out there. And also providing students, as well as those recent graduates, with the career readiness transition into their next job. Also, I also work at the Knowledge House, running their volunteer program. And my background in human resources really allows me to kind of share a lot of the insight that are at these companies with the students that are trying to break into like these tech jobs. And with that, I'll hand it over to Bedelia.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So I currently work with the New York City Tech Talent Pipeline as a technical recruiter. It's an initiative that's come out of the mayor's office. Basically, we are providing training and also additional resources to connect local New Yorkers to jobs here in tech. My background is in higher ed, but I actually transitioned into tech because I felt like it was a broader space where I felt I could be challenged. And also I just felt like there was so much going on there that there was space for everybody. So I've actually recruited in a startup. I've actually recruited at Google, and I've also been a career coach with CUNY students. And now through the Tech Talent Pipeline, I get to serve candidates that are coming out of boot camps and also CUNY and any other programs here in New York City. So I'm really excited to join you guys all tonight.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we'll just kick off the questions. First one is, what challenge in your programs have you encountered due to COVID-19? And what kinds of things have you changed in your program due to COVID?
I can go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Derek.
In terms of the challenges that COVID has presented to the programs, I mean, being in the virtual space, I feel like a lot of companies weren't ready for that. Being able to kind of teach students virtually, trying to adapt to those like new learning styles. A lot of people are like, people who like to kind of work with people like hands and like, just being very hands-on. Training people to kind of work on like their own has been something that's, I feel like my program had to kind of, shift, and just being mindful of, the students that we are working with, the challenges that they do have. A lot of students don't have access to Wi-Fi. They don't have, second monitors to code on. So being able to provide all of the resources that they need in order to make sure that the training that they receive is something that's like, something where they can learn from.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just went through the boot camp and I did not have a second monitor either. Like, that's definitely an issue of accessibility.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering, like, was there any benefits from kind of transitioning to this remote space as opposed to being in person? Did you find any benefits to that at all?
I mean, I'd say at Breakthrough Tech,
I would say, you can go on. Yeah. Go on, sorry.
No worries. I'd say at Breakthrough Tech, we definitely found some benefits. It was a little bit of a learning curve to understand how to build community virtually. But across our programs, we sort of started creating some norms around, encouraging students to have their videos on as much as possible, and using breakout rooms to really, facilitate, small groups working together, still being able to facilitate like small cohorts within our program through breakout rooms and things like that. Keeping our sort of teacher to student ratio pretty high, so they're still able to pop around to breakout rooms and support students. And, obviously sort of just sharing resources and encouraging students to, connect outside the program and things like that as well. So after that sort of like learning curve of sort of figuring out sort of what those norms are, in every program that we've offered since, March-ish, we've surveyed students about the experience, and it's been a pretty like 50-50 split, I'd say, with, some students like, missing out on, the in-person contact and the ability to make face-to-face connection. But by and large, we're hearing from a lot of our students that it's easier for them to not have to commute. And especially when working across the CUNY system, we try and do things centrally, but inevitably someone always ends up traveling from a borough that's a little too far out and things like that. So it also allows them to kind of better balance some of their other responsibilities they have at home or outside of school or work. It's just sort of an easier shift into the virtual learning space. So in a lot of ways, and I really would echo what Derek said as well, with providing resources for students. So we were really intentional about providing hotspots, paying for the hotspot access, providing laptops with video cameras and sound systems and that type of thing for all of our programs. So with all that provided, it seems like students really, for a lot of students, the virtual environment ended up being like almost facilitating them being able to better participate in our programs.
Yeah, no, I think that's like a really great point, because my cohort was totally online, and like not having to make that commute was just like a blessing. So I really appreciate that personally. But yeah, does anyone want to touch on any more benefits they've found in their programs before we move on?
I was going to say the same thing as Amy because we work with candidates across the different boroughs. And I think I've actually liked the fact that I can connect with candidates and I don't feel restrained like, oh, you know, you have to meet us at a certain place. There's candidates coming from the Bronx or Queens, Brooklyn or Manhattan, Staten Island. I know it's hard for some of those folks to make the shift. I think one of the things I felt was a challenge, and just to be honest, I think a lot of job seekers, like the added stress of being in a pandemic and finding it very challenging, I think, for them to deal with the fact some people in their family were unemployed or some people were sick because of COVID. I think switching to a virtual environment, I think as a provider, we were very intentional with checking in with our candidates and recognizing like, hey, you know, reach out to us, let us know how you're feeling. I know with my job seekers, like sometimes I just connect with them on Slack and we talk about like the British baking show or something like that, or music. Because I think a lot of people like to add job search or finding an internship, it was a lot, but I'm realizing like, hey, we're all human, we're all dealing with this. And even letting them know, like, it's okay if you push back on recruiters or whoever you're working with or teachers and let them know, like, I'm not feeling well today. I felt like it's opened up a space for people to actually share, like, this is how I'm feeling. Can you give me extra time or can we move this? So I think that's one of the positives that's come out of this event. People actually being able to set boundaries and ask for more time, because now we kind of all have time and we're in virtual environments. So a lot of companies are really flexible. So I think on my end, that's what I saw.
Yeah, and I liked how you connect that to the job seeking process, because that's something that a lot of us are really going through right now. I'd love to hear of ways that you think folks can change their mindset or change their strategy around job seeking during the pandemic. Do you have any like input about that?
I mean, I can share and then I'll kick it off to Derek and Amy. I think one thing that I've noticed is it's opened up a lot more doors. So a lot of job seekers are restricted to, I need a job seek here in New York City, but if you go on Eventbrite, on different Slack channels, like there's opportunities for you to check out webinars like in other cities. There's like a Slack channel that I like, Picadia, like they were hosting events in Chicago, in Miami, and we were all connected through this virtual environment. So I think that's one of the positives, knowing that you're not restricted by location. Like there are other job seekers, there are other companies that are looking for talent. And I think with the remote environment, a lot of companies shifted and realized, hey, we can actually extend this role to someone that's amazing and offer it remotely. So that's the other big shift I saw with candidates, is a lot of them realize I don't have to be restricted to New York City. If there's an amazing company, we're going to be remote for a while. So a lot of them didn't have to worry about relocating or like moving across country. They're taking these amazing opportunities now because that field is open. And I think in tech, that has always existed. I've worked in companies where I was dealing with coworkers in Europe or the Philippines, but because of this remote learning, I think a lot of students are getting these great skills where you actually are practicing how to work on remote teams, which is a key thing that a lot of tech companies are looking for, and you're actually practicing it now. So that's one of the things I'm seeing with job seekers. But I think in terms of looking for jobs now, a lot of it depends on networking, and attending this webinar is a great way to network, but realizing that it doesn't always have to be face-to-face, like being open to different types of meetups, being open to connecting with people on LinkedIn. I found that a lot of people are really receptive on LinkedIn when you reach out to them, especially software engineers, like have a lot of time on their hands, so they're more than willing to chat with you. So that's what I've learned just talking with different job seekers. Amy and Derek, what you've seen on your hands, which
you have something to say? You can go, Amy.
Sure. Yeah, I would definitely echo a lot of what Bedelia is saying as well. I like to think that like networking sort of just shifted. It's just sort of how you operationalize it looks a little different in a virtual setting. And I think in some ways it can be really beneficial. I'm thinking back, I think that was another thing we started to like realize with our students in programming as well, is some students actually felt more comfortable sort of speaking up, you know, in a chat setting or in a virtual setting, which was great because they could still practice a lot of those skills that are just as important to be able to do sort of that written or digital communication as well as in person. So in some ways, for example, like during this panel, you all can use the chat to have little side conversations or do shout outs or that type of thing, which in an in-person setting that might not be as easily facilitated. So there's some other things that you can sort of use or do in these virtual settings to make sure you're making connections with people or sharing information or sort of getting your personal information out there. So I think that's really great. It's just sort of still thinking about attending networking events, et cetera, but just thinking a little differently about how you approach them to sort of get the same type of effect out of it. So I'd say that's sort of one of the ways that you might want to like think, or people think, or should think about, you know, shifting their mindset a little bit with the job strategy or job search strategy. Because I kind of sit, I think most of us sort of do, like kind of straddle the tech world as well as sort of a more nonprofit government world. I think operating across both of those sectors right now has been really interesting because I think in a lot of ways the tech sector has fared pretty okay across the board. And even where there were maybe, you know, some layoffs or some declines in the industry sort of earlier on in the pandemic, it seems like a lot of these companies will be kind of weathering that pretty well. But on the nonprofit and government side, I think we're seeing a very different story where there's a lot of organizations that have really, or sort of the fundraising climate and the funding climate looks really uncertain at the moment. So now it could be a really great time to be, you know, brushing up on those tech skills if you have them or sort of focusing on that. So I'd say that's sort of another way to sort of, you know, shift your mindset as well, is like clearly everyone, you know, sort of that it piques your interest to attend this panel. So there's maybe sort of some sort of interest or experience or skill set you already have. So I think the tech sector could have, you know, some really great opportunities within it for all the reasons Bedelia was just mentioning. So,
yeah, and just to echo what Amy just said, just you got to continue to, you know, do on those projects, continue to work on whatever idea that you have, because now we have like the time to do it. Being able to, I feel like there's been like a birth of like a new wave of like resources that people can use. I feel like for me, I found like Slack is like my like go-to thing. There's so many channels out there. Like if you just type on Google best tech like Slack channels, you'll get like probably like 100 of them. My favorites one is We Build Black. I know Bedelia mentioned the Techadia. Another one is NYC Tech. That's a very good one. And you have people that are posting jobs nonstop. Also, there's another website out there. I think it's called layoffs.fyi. And basically you can get like what companies are hiring right now. You can see what companies are, you know, it's sad to say, but are, you know, laying off people. But you'll get to see like, these are the people that are out there, and, you know, someone who may have been laid off, maybe like a senior person in like some way, shape or form. And you can reach out to that person like, hey, I'm just, you know, I'm new to like this coding world. Would you mind being like a mentor or just taking a look at my project? So even though we're not in like a social world, social has kind of shifted to more of like behind the screen, which I think is easy for everybody because, you know, you don't have to see face to face, but you can chat. In that chat function, it takes like a lot of pressure out. So being able to connect people through like social media, through like LinkedIn, even Facebook or, you know, IG, Snapchat, I comment, and I feel like one of the ways that has worked for me is just if you comment on people's posts, you'll open up a whole bunch of, I guess, like, you know, like new people that you would could reach out with. So in terms of changing your mindset, I know it's going to be tough right now because you may have reached out to people and you haven't heard like anything back. That's just because of the world that we're in now, but stay consistent. The more consistent you are, the better chance you have at, you know, getting that next role.
For sure. Yeah, so I would like to switch gears to more specifically about women in the tech industry. So I'd like to know what kind of projects or internships do you recommend women to do specifically? Like specifically women and women of color first entering in the tech space.
Yeah. I thought this was a really interesting question when I saw that that could be one of the ones that we addressed. And honestly, the first thing that came to my mind is like the project you're interested in. I would definitely hesitate to kind of like typecast if there's any like type of project or type of experience that women in particular should have. It should be the one that you're interested in. And interested could mean because you're interested in the content area, the topic area. You don't have to have a ton of experience to necessarily take the project on or kind of throw your hat in the ring to get involved. If it's piquing your interest, you think you have some relevant skills, go for it. But so definitely if you're interested in sort of the content area, what it's working on, and then if it's going to help develop skills that you think you need or are interested in developing to sort of further your career to that next level, like that's the project you should be taking on. Something you're really interested and excited about, and that also helps build the skills that you're looking to build. So I think that was sort of the first thing that came to my mind. But would definitely be interested in Derek and Bedelia's perspectives on that as well.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. Whatever you feel like you want to do it. What I will say is because I'm starting to dabble in like the IT clouds and cyber security space. There is a lot of need for women there. I've seen HR reports, like diversity reports, and it's horrible. It is bad. So there are a few Slack groups, like I said, that you can just join and just find jobs out there. There is a women in cyber security website that you can go to, and they would basically match you up with like, you know, any type of like internships that are out there, entry level jobs, and anything within the cloud. I think is like where everybody should be at, because that's where you see a lot of companies are going towards, and that's where they need like the most help at. But whatever you feel like you want to do, don't just continue with that, and don't let that stop you. Whatever idea you have, whatever, you know, passion you have, just go for it.
For sure.
I was just going to say, I think sometimes it's intimidating. I know for some of the women job seekers, sorry, my internet's like a bit unstable. So I also recommend look for volunteer opportunities. Like it can be scary to do your own project and bring it out there. So there's Code Brigade, which is Code for America. They have different cities where you can connect with. And now because of everything being remote, like you can help out a city in the Midwest or the West Coast. The other thing I noticed is because of Corona, a lot of females, like they were volunteering. I remember one candidate I worked with, she actually used that as experience when she interviewed, and it really helped her. The only experience she actually had was going to boot camp, and she was working in the hospitality industry, and even helping out with Corona trackers, you know, helping out for supplies. I really think like what Amy and Derek said, like it doesn't have to be something like, you know, big or, you know, a huge social impact. It could be something like, what is your favorite books to read, and giving people recommendations, your favorite shows. I think it's really what a lot of companies are looking for is the passion you have. And I really love to hear why you created it. You know, I find it interesting when people are like, this is a problem I saw in my world, and this is how I came up with the solution. And I think that's the key thing a lot of hiring managers and senior engineers are trying to discover, like, what was your drive for creating that? And what, you know, were the steps that you took to do that? So I would say if you're nervous, start with looking for volunteer opportunities. You can find that on LinkedIn. I'll throw that in the chat. One of the ones I've mentioned, but you can always start by volunteering, and you can always start by going to hackathons as well if you're kind of nervous. A lot of females I work with, that's how they started. They went to a hackathon, and from that idea, they just kept building on it.
Yeah, and another great site for pro bono projects that I joined is called Build for Black Lives. There's just also a really great one for using your tech skills in the social impact space. So I definitely recommend everyone who's here to check that out because there's a lot of really cool and interesting projects on there. Just to go back to like the women in the tech industry, do you see any unique challenges in connecting women technologists to internships or opportunities?
I mean, I'd say this is one where I think that some of the answers like we hear sometimes that are like that women aren't as confident, or there's not enough women in the pipeline, or things like that. And I think the more I hear responses like that, I really like, but I have all those hundreds, not thousands of students we work with at CUNY each year. For every answer like that, like there's hundreds of women that we work with that would prove that wrong. So one of the challenges, when I actually think about challenges, it's not necessarily the pipeline or that, women need to be more confident in their abilities or anything like that. Some of the things I really think about is like, one, that we like struggle to keep up with the industry demand in a lot of ways. We have employers that want to work with our students, and we have a very small team at Breakthrough Tech, and we work with somewhere between hundreds and thousands of CUNY women each year, and really like being able to make that connection and really do more targeted sort of recruiting and sourcing of candidates for employers is actually one of the challenges that we face, because I think it's an area where we ourselves like know and want to grow. But that's honestly one of the challenges I think of, is like keeping up with the industry demand and really making those connections better and better, so that employers and students are sort of finding the right fit. And that's something I think is a very honed skill that someone who's worked in recruiting, like either Bedelia or Derek, might have a better sense of. But that's, I think, as us organizationally is really focused on programmatic and sort of augmenting the student experience at CUNY. That's sort of one of the challenges I'd say that we'd face. The other thing I think about is Breakthrough Tech in our programs. We bring students that identify as female or identify as women across all the CUNY campuses together into our programs. And so when they're with us, they're in programming, some of them for the first time, where they're surrounded by other people that identify as women in their classes or outside their classes, because a lot of time in their CS degree programs or in their classes, they are predominantly people that identify as male. So there's sort of this balance of creating that community and space within our programs, but then knowing, as we are encouraging students and supporting students in pursuing careers in the tech sector, that they might not, this is sort of a unique experience they have with their program. And so as they pursue careers in tech, they might sort of, again, be feeling, outnumbered or a little isolated just by some of these, external factors. So I think that's sort of another challenge that we try and really think through. And it's why we're really intentional in the community building in our program, because the hope is that as students progress in their career, they can sort of always come back to this community as an area of support, and they sort of built those connections and network to support them. Because knowing that as they go into the industry, and especially in some of these areas like cybersecurity, where it's even sort of a starker contrast about the gender imbalance, they might not sort of be able to immediately draw upon that support as they're interviewing and progressing in their career.
Any other inputs?
I was just going to say, I think for a lot of companies, the truth is, like, for every female that applies, there's probably 3 or 4 times as male candidates. It's just the nature of the industry. And one of the things I've learned is that in tech, you've learned to advocate for yourself and be assertive. I remember I worked in a startup, and I was able to suggest ideas and bring stuff to the table, and it didn't seem like I was being assertive. They actually liked that part of me contributing to them. So one of the things I really encourage female candidates is to seek support from even male counterparts, like not only focus on reaching out to other female engineers, but reaching out to male engineers, like finding people that are going to support and advocate for you. I think a lot of times, a lot of companies, they refer, they hire based on referrals. So a lot of times, people are referring people in their network, and if they're males, maybe they're mostly males. So it's really important for a lot of candidates just to kind of open your network and see every opportunity, regardless of gender, as someone that could lead you a step closer or give you a better understanding of what you want to pursue. So my advice is, like, don't be scared. Like, reach out to as many people as you can on LinkedIn. Like Derek mentioned, people are busy. They're not always going to reach out to you. I always tell candidates, like, don't take it personally. People might have a bunch of emails or they don't recognize you. So just keep at it. And also, like, attend these webinars, connect with people, and just ask them every time you connect with people, what are some resources, or are there other people that you recommend I connect with? For example, I attended a meditation like 2 weeks ago, and I actually connected with someone there because they wanted to transition into recruiting. And I was really, surprised, like, he was able to, reach out to me and say, hey, can we connect? So don't be afraid, I would say, but realize that this is a common practice in tech, that people ask for referrals, people are asking for advice. It's a muscle that I think a lot of us have to get used to, but once you do, it becomes very easy just to reach out to people and ask them, hey, can I talk to you? Do you mind serving as a referral? So that's my advice for women seekers looking for jobs now.
For sure, sure. And I think this goes into our next segment about internship opportunities and projects. So what kind of things have you done to make sure your students continue to connect to opportunities, different projects or different companies?
Hosting events like this, I think, would be like the #1 way, just to where people can kind of meet. Hey, I'm working on this. You're working on that. Let's see what we could do. I can't stress it enough. Like, as much as people are on like Snapchat and IG, you got to use LinkedIn too. Like, if you're looking for a job, like, you just got to use it. Now LinkedIn has stories, so you can put up a little story of, hey, I'm doing this, line, like this line of code or something like that. So just being able to put yourself out there and being like your own boss. That's how I see it. Like, you don't want to, like, you're putting yourself out there to work for or to work with someone. So just being very active on like social media, going to events. Something that I did at the last a webinar that I was at was I just typed in my profile, and then everybody else typed in their entire profile. So what I did was I just saved that chat, and then at the end of the day, I just reached out to everybody. So that's how you can kind of really continue to find those new jobs and like those new ways. Like, you have your passive way to where you can post on like Indeed, you can put your resume here and there, but being active is where you really see people like getting stuff done, like getting in people's like DMs, just reaching out. Like, I can't stress that enough to anybody. You just have to be active. Passive only works for certain things, but if you're actively seeking and like you're hungry for like any type of job, you got to do, like, you just have to be active with it.
Yeah, for sure. I think everyone, oh yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say, the other thing too is, oh my God, I lost my train of thought. But I'll keep talking, it'll come back. But I think the other thing too is the connections, right? So just to give you a better understanding of recruitment, like right now it's recruitment season. So a lot of university recruiters are recruiting for internships and also for full-time roles. So I know a lot of students, like, they worry like, oh my God, what's going to happen like after this? So I do want to add, like, for smaller and medium-sized companies, they probably will save recruitment for next year. So definitely look at Angel List. I think that's a great resource. The other thing is sign up for newsletters. There's Diversify Tech, which is a great newsletter that shares like different events, and they also share opportunities. And I think what they also have is this cool feature where they have a link just for students. So if you want to feature your profile, you can do that. But I also encourage students, like, let's say there's a job. I know a lot of candidates think, oh, that job is out of my reach. I always recommend, like, apply for it because you never know. They may see your profile and they may say, hey, we want to keep them on file and we'll reach out to them when there's a better opportunity. So I always tell job seekers, do not shoot yourself in the foot. Do not take yourself out of the running. Like, apply for something and don't say no to you. I always say, like, keep pushing it further. I know from a lot of male software engineers, like, that's what they do. They're like, no, I didn't meet all the requirements, but I was interested in working there, so I applied. So I realized, hey, then that's something we should be doing. We should continue to apply, because really that's what happens. A recruiter sees your resume, they realize you may not be a fit, but they may refer you to another role, or they may know someone else. Tech is such a big network that the recruiters know each other because they work with each other, or software engineers move to different jobs. So I would just say keep reaching out to people, keep networking, because they will lead you to opportunities or share resources that will be helpful to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Can I just add one thing?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Coming from like the HR side, what was just mentioned about not, if you don't meet all of the requirements for AM job, most of the times, I want to say probably like 80% of the times, the top, like, how the job description has like, the bullet 1, the bullet 2, like the top 4 is what they're really trying to find. So if you meet either 3 out of 4 of those, still just go for it. Like for the most part, the last like 4 or 5 are stuff that they just, that's not like really key. Well, I mean, it's key to the role, but it's not so groundbreaking to where like if you don't have this, like then we won't hire you. But those top 4 or 5 is like what you really need to be just choosing from. Like if you meet like 2 or 3, still apply. Shoot your shot. The worst that they could say is no.
Right. Do you think years of experience is something less important now that we're in the pandemic? Like in the job posting, as you said?
What I would say is if your projects can show that you are matched up to someone who has that amount of experience, then it doesn't mean a thing. Because if I can show you a platform that I built and I've only been coding for like a couple of months compared to somebody who has like 5 years of experience but doesn't, if we had like the same amount of knowledge, then the years doesn't really mean much. Like I'm able to do the exact same thing that this person was.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the audience are really appreciative to hear that, especially myself, having only been a coder for 6 months. But yeah, so next question is, what difficulties that you've encountered what difficulties have you encountered with digital internships and opportunities?
I can speak from the Breakthrough Tech perspective. I mean, I think we touched on this a little bit again in the beginning, but just the understanding of like the resources that a lot of the students we work with need to be most successful in an internship, which we had the privilege of working, pretty closely with a lot of the companies that we work with, and having built up a stock of laptops and hotspots, but just really understanding that like, that there are some things that in sort of the corporate world or tech world as it is might kind of be taken for granted, to kind of prompt a lot of the companies we work with to think a little more broadly about what some students or incoming interns just in general might need, especially that they're coming into a virtual setting, one. So even just some of like the norms around, we all like to have our cameras on. It helps to sort of build bonding and community. But we found that there are students in our program that either like the Wi-Fi isn't just quite stable enough or reliable enough, or there's maybe some chaos, some siblings or whatnot that are frequenting in the background, or you just don't have like a clean sort of backdrop or something like that. So we've definitely found that some of our students have been hesitant to come on to screen. I had one student admit that she fidgets a lot, which really tried to ensure that like you're still you, and that if it's possible, like that video screen does help, but to get employers to really think about what some of those hesitancies might be, to try and either normalize them for the students. Like it's so easy to just say like, all right, great, we're all gonna try and get our videos on. If you need hotspots, we're you do, sort of like the daily sort of stand-up meetings to kick off the day, but then, people sort of have an hour or two to do some individual work, and then they maybe collaborate in small group meetings, and then you all come together at the end of the day, really thinking about what the day needs to be structured like, so that people have sort of the interpersonal and collaborative time that they need, but aren't sitting, on Zoom calls like this for 8 hours of the day. So I think those are a couple things that I think about, is just, thinking about the different sort of contexts that we all exist in, that it might be helpful to normalize or provide some support around. And then two, really thinking about how you sort of structure your day intentionally, understanding that it's a different kind of exhausting and a different type of experience to sort of be so glued to your screen and your video. So I don't know if Bedelia and Derek also sort of have other things that come to mind for them.
For me, in terms of like a program level, just working with companies, a lot of companies how do you for us it would more along the lines of like using those tools, like how, because I feel like you have like a bunch of companies who weren't in like the tech space that are kind of understanding how you have to use tech now, whether it be like social media, building up some type of a database and all that. So for those like non-tech savvy companies coming into this tech world, they weren't using tools like Zoom or Google Classroom or anything along those lines to kind of manage their team. So for us, it was kind of like a struggle at first, just to kind of make sure that we're sending our students to a place where they can actually thrive. But after providing them with resources as well as trainings, which was, I feel like, another source of like, I guess, like income for our program, just to upskill other companies on like these tools. But once they got a handle on it, then it was much easier. But the biggest problem I saw early on with like managing these like the digital opportunities was, how do these companies manage their remote teams? That was something that they'd never had to ever do, and for them it was kind of like a new muscle that they just had to build.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was just going to add that overall, all had to switch to a remote environment. It did mean there was a shift, like our homes became our office. So I do want to share with the folks on the call today is, as a recruiter, like I do many calls. So it's perfectly normal. Like I've heard dogs or pets in the background, or kids background, or some people are worried like, oh, how do I have to dress? I think all of us are kind of realizing this is the new normal, and just giving folks a heads up, like, hey, you might hear my dog, hear a doorbell rings. Like for me, I just realized, hey, I'm literally in your house and you're seeing my home too. Like this is a different experience interviewing. So I think it's important, like a lot of people, like it's shifted the way you interview. It's very personal now. Like you're seeing a side of people that we normally don't show, and realizing that the person on the other end is also human, and just letting them know like, hey, I might have issues with my internet, so I quickly shift to a phone call. It's not a big issue, but I think the more open you are with the recruiter, the more we can work with you. The other thing too is I hear what Amy says, Zoom fatigue is so real. I think it's really important how you plan your day. I think now a lot of us are realizing, hey, we can do exercise or yoga in the morning before we start work, or it's important that I take breaks regularly so that I'm not sitting down, or that I'm eating and I'm not in front of a laptop all day. So I would say it's really important for you to kind of figure out what the onboarding process is with regardless if it's an internship or full-time role, and how companies are acclimating new hires on. Even though we're all virtual, there's still a way that you can feel part of a community with the company. But it's important to know, like, how is this happening? Some companies are really cool, like they actually will tape meetings knowing that there may be parents, there may be people with other obligations in the home, so people can see that meeting later on and don't have to be present. Some companies actually give employees time, like, hey, maybe you need to do your grocery shopping, maybe you need to do things in the middle of the day. They're perfectly fine with that. So I think asking companies or looking into job descriptions that state how they're actually dealing with COVID and remote work is really key. And I think a lot of companies are realizing, like, we need to give you a stipend if you want an office, a home office. There's some companies that will actually give you money to build out your home office. So there's some perks that come along to this, but I think these are some things you should think about as you look for internships or for jobs. Like, these are questions you can ask because we're all working remotely and you want to be set up for success. So don't ever hesitate to ask, like, hey, what are some things that you're shifting to now that it's a remote environment? Do I get a budget to purchase stuff? Do I get weekly check-ins with my team? You know, ask what that looks like.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really good advice. At this point, just in the interest of time, if anyone in the audience has questions, go ahead and post it in the Zoom chat. I love that everyone's like posting really great resources. I didn't see any questions so far, but I guess I have a question. What do you all think is like recruiters and people that are hiring for internships, apprenticeships, things like that? What do you think they're looking for in a candidate? Like, how can you stand out in a time like this in their hiring process?
For me, my go-to is always your follow-up. Everybody will apply to a job, but if you follow up, you're going to stand out more than anybody else because a lot of people don't like follow-up. I'll put the name of the tool in the chat, but something that I teach students is there's this email finder that I use to where I guess like my teaching goes along the lines of avoiding the applicant tracking system to where you kind of get caught up in that and getting directly to that person, like the person who says yes or no. So with this email finder, you're able to get like that person's email and just reach out to them. So you bypass all of that, going through that applicant tracking system to, having those like keywords and stuff like that and getting directly to that person, which I think is like key. And I think that's a good way to kind of, attack this job search. And I think that it'll be like very, very helpful. And for me, when it's used, the tool that I use is for it's for a business to business. So it works for me in terms of like sales, but I've also used it for help students use it for, finding jobs too.
I was going to add, Narissa, that I think the other key thing is a lot of recruiters are interested in hearing, like, what have you been doing with this time? I think a lot of companies shifted, they weren't hiring, so they knew that the job search was hard, but it's really key to share what have you been working on. And they're not looking for you to say, were you working? Because they knew that it was so hard, but if you were doing any online courses, if you were doing any volunteer work, if there was any projects, I think that's what's going to make you stand out, especially now with, Corona. A lot of people were working on Corona trackers. A lot of people had the opportunity to just help out in their community. And that's what really makes candidates stand out. I know, like, when I was at Google, like, some of the things that we were looking for is, what are the things that you're doing outside of coding? Like, you're still a human. Like, what are the other things that you're passionate and important about? Like, some people are DJs, some people love sports. So I would say, don't be afraid to show that on your LinkedIn, on your resume, because those are the things that really attract engineering, software engineers, because they also want to know, like, I want to work with someone that I enjoy talking to and that I would hopefully be friends with. So I think that's the other key thing that a lot of you should think of. Like, it's not just the coding, but who you are as a person as well. Some of you are doing great things outside of coding that you should definitely add to your resume.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice for going forward in the job seeking process, you know, humanize the process a little bit more. And to go on the point of humanizing ourselves, so it's really difficult to hear like no every single time you get an application, right? Or not even worse, not to hear anything at all and to get the ghost from the recruiter. So how do you advise people to keep going and pushing through this process? Because it is really difficult, and even more difficult right now when we're at this time in history. So do you guys have any advice to that?
Yeah, I would say celebrate your wins. Like, I think a lot of times we can be, we're our worst critic. So I've had candidates who are like, oh man, I blew an interview, but I'm like, the fact that you got an interview, like, I hope you're celebrating that. The other thing is I always encourage job seekers, don't look at the job seeking process as only applying for jobs. Like, also reach out to folks, make that part of your job search. Attending this webinar, like, this is part of your job search. You know, it's not only like applying for jobs day in and day out. Celebrate when you make a new contact. If you've done informational interviews, this is when you connect with people and kind of learn about their journey. I think that's a win because that's a new person to add to your network. But for me, it's okay to take a break. Some days it's hard to hear rejection, but I would say make sure you have a network of people that you're connecting with, because a lot of software engineers don't always share their story, but there's a lot of no's that a lot of software engineers had to go through before they heard a yes. So I always tell job seekers, like, have that community, have your squad that you can go back to who's going to motivate you. And for a lot of us, that's like our squad or group chat on our phone. And I have a couple of people that I do that. You know, we celebrate our wins, and we also push people when they're doubting, should I apply for this job? We're like, definitely, you should apply. If we know someone, we try to refer them to someone. But I would say, like, take care of you, make sure you have a squad, and also, like, celebrate your wins. Treat yourself, because that is most important. Like, you have to celebrate your wins, no matter how big or small they are.
Really, really good advice, because I'm sure a lot of us are job seeking right now and are really appreciative to hear that. And then I have another question here in the chat. I'd like to know, once we connected with a professional from a certain industry, how often should we follow up with them? Like every 3 months? And what's a good topic to include in any sort of follow-up email or LinkedIn message?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that one, and then I'll even try and touch on, I think there was one further up from Rosemary about a question about backgrounds. So first, to tackle the one sort of about when to follow up with people within an industry. I mean, I think it depends on sort of the individual connection. I know some people that are really proactive about it and sort of keep a spreadsheet of all the people that they want to stay in touch with and sort of mark off, like, every 3 months, are they, like, reaching out to that person about something. And obviously, if you are, you know, tracking down a specific opportunity or opening at the position, it could be a little more frequent than that. Definitely, if you've applied for the role, it would be more frequent. But if this is just sort of a contact that you're looking to keep warm, I think every 3 months is sort of a good rough outline. But some of the other indicators I use are sort of like, sometimes, like, around the start of the new year is a good time to reach out. Sort of, it tends to be when everyone's reaching out, but that usually gives you a good opportunity to do so. Or like the start of a new season, like summer, to check in around things like summer vacations, or if they're taking any time off. And then same thing with, like, sometimes depending on the industry, if there's sort of cycles of busy seasons or seasons when things might have been completing. So really starting to understand what might be some of the sort of like milestones in their professional year might be good times to reach out. And then another thing that's great is, like, attending events like this, or reading articles that are relevant, looking out for the name of the company or the organization. Definitely keep your eye out for anything, because that's a really great excuse to reach out and say, oh, I was at this event and your company came up because of XYZ. So I thought I'd, reach out and say hi. That's usually like the go-to or like the easiest way. I think the LinkedIn tip is great if they're posting things on LinkedIn. Easily a comment with a quick, like, congrats, or this is so interesting, or love that you're doing this. Would love to catch up sometime, or something along those lines. I think those are some really good sort of indicators of when to reach out in terms of like topics. And I think we already sort of addressed some of the backgrounds in the chat. And I would agree with Bedelia as well. The backgrounds are kind of the norm. I would say if you're sort of nervous about an interview, go with something that's sort of neutral. So either sort of like a solid background, or like one that's sort of like an office setting, whether it's sort of like a blank brick wall with a plant or two or something like that. Or, if you really love your STAR background, it could be a really great like talking point with the recruiter or the interviewer, because they might ask about it. And if you want to say, well, actually, like, astrology is one of my hobbies, and so that's something you kind of like work into the conversation a little bit too. So you do have like some flexibility there. Neutral is always best if you're really like nervous, but otherwise, like Bedelia said, backgrounds are definitely the norm these days.
Yeah, for sure. And just in the interest of time, because it's almost 7, I'll hand it back over to Allie to close us out.
Yeah, I love to like stop it right at 7 normally, but it was such a good conversation. I didn't want to butt in at all. I also particularly loved the part about the backgrounds, because right before all of this, I was telling everyone about my new West Elm background. But anyway, I just once again want to thank all of the panelists for being here and sharing all of their expertise, for Narissa for moderating. Obviously, excellent job. And I will share the resources. I'll try to kind of put those together and share that with everyone that was here today. And, if you saw the LinkedIn in the chats, try to save some of those so you can reach out to all the folks. I think there's a lot of people out there that just want to connect, just like you. And so on that note, if you love this event, want to see more, follow us on LinkedIn. We're Social Builder US. If you follow just the Social Builder, it will be the French Social Builder, which is great for practicing your French, but maybe not as much for these events. And then also on Twitter, so at Social Builder U1. Our next one will be on developing new and maintaining old tech pipelines for women, which will be on Tuesday, November 17th. And lastly, I'd be remiss to not note, if you haven't voted yet, please go out and vote if you can. And if you can't, tell anybody who can to vote. Anyway, well, on that note, thank you everyone so much for coming tonight. And yeah, have a lovely, lovely rest of your evening. I would hope you guys enjoyed the talk as much as I did. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. You have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you, Narissa and Allie. This was great. Bye, everyone.
Bye.